Introduce the panel. I'm going to introduce Matt Krause, who will lead the discussion. Matt graduated. Yeah, go ahead and applaud now. Come on, Matt. Let me tell you about him. He graduated from the inaugural class of Liberty University School of Law in 2007. Matt opened up the Texas office for Liberty Counsel after that. And in 2012, Matt won the general election for Texas House of Representatives, District 93. In 4 terms, Matt has consistently been recognized for his efforts in supporting limited government, fiscal responsibility, pro-life issues, Second Amendment issues, and religious freedom. And even though he's young, and we're going to talk about the current generation, he is married already. And he has 5 children. That's my kind of conservative. All right, Matt, you lead this panel, all right?
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate you. All right, good morning. How are y'all doing? Man, I'm so excited that everybody packed the room out to come hear the conservative rising stars. I'm sure it had nothing else to do with what's going on this morning, so that's awesome. But we are going to hear from some incredible individuals today who are leading the conservative movement from a young age at this point. I'm going to ask them to come up. We'll have a few remarks, and we'll introduce each one of them as they're coming up to talk. But if our panelists will make their way up, we have Makin Acciani, James Okeefe, Rachel Bovard, and Morgan Zegers. So if y'all will come and take your seats, as I said, we'll introduce you a little bit as you're getting up to talk. But as Jerry said, my name is Matt Krause. I'm honored to be a representative of the Texas House District 93. And one of the animating principles that got me into politics was the protection of religious liberty. And I was fortunate enough to start the Liberty Counsel office for Matt and Anita Staver in Texas in 2007. Almost went to work for Kelly Shackelford if I hadn't won the election in 2012. And so religious liberty has always played a big role in what I wanted to do in politics. And so this last session, we actually got to defend a religious liberty bill along with my good friend Brian Hughes, who's sitting in the front row right there, the senator. We had introduced a bill called the First Amendment Defense Act for a couple of sessions now. We saw what happened with the fire chief in Atlanta, if you remember a few years back. He got fired because of what he wrote in a Sunday school manual that had nothing to do with his official job duties, but he got fired for that purpose of stating marriage between one man and one woman. And so we started thinking it's not good when the government starts penalizing private individuals for how they believe, when it has nothing to do with their jobs, nothing to do with requirements. And so Senator Hughes and I have been working for years now on the First Amendment Defense Act. And as we were going through session, the San Antonio City Council was looking at hiring vendors for the airport, people they were going to allow to come and serve food and have their business there. And one was Chick-fil-A. And at one point, they had said, you know what, we think that they're discriminatory against the LGBT community and others, and we found out they thought they were discriminatory because they had given donations to anti-LGBT groups. Well, those organizations turned out to be the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and the Salvation Army. And yeah, so every time you go and drop some money in that red bucket, you're a bigot. I bet you didn't know that, huh? And so Senator Hughes and I said, you know what, this is a big issue, but we need to focus it and clarify it a little bit with what's going on. So we actually have what was called the Save Chick-fil-A bill in Texas, and it said the government cannot discriminate against you based on who you donate to, who you support, or who you associate with from a religious perspective. And it was incredible because for the first time this session, we had an LGBT caucus in the House, and they actually killed the bill on a point of order on the deadline to pass House bills this session. And everybody said it was dead. It was a huge victory for them. It was big in the media. And so I walked over to the Senate and said, hey, Senator Hughes, you guys got to get started over in the Senate. And we had about 7 days to get a bill onto the Senate floor, out of the Senate floor, onto the House floor, out of the House floor, and onto the governor's desk. And the Lord was gracious and he was good, and we hit every single one of those things. And it was the fastest bill that passed during the entire Texas session. So it was a huge blessing. But Senator Hughes and I kept saying, we should not have to go through this. This is constitutional. We should not be having to do this. And so that's why I always think it's important that we have people in office who understand the Constitution. You know, in the 1600s, the Carolinas were creating their Constitution, and they actually had John Locke, the famous John Locke, come over from England and help them put it together. And it was voluminous, it was heavy, it was big, because they tried to take care of every contingency that they could think of. And right after that time, William Penn was starting to found Pennsylvania. And they said, hey, William, are you going to do the same thing the Carolinas did? Are you going to bring John Locke over, those others? And he said, no. And they said, why not? And he said, you know, because governments, like clocks, go from the motion men give them. Governments are instituted for man, not man for government. If men be good, government cannot be bad. But if men be bad, government will never be good. And he understood the fact that it doesn't matter if you have the greatest constitution in the world, which we do. It doesn't matter if you have the greatest limited government checks and balances principles that have ever been conceived by man in your governing document. If you have men and women in office who do not understand those constitutional principles, swear fidelity to those constitutional principles, and act in accordance with those constitutional principles, then it's meaningless. And that's why I'm so excited about the individuals we have here on stage today, because this is a younger generation who understands that, who values it, who knows what we need to be doing in order to keep that constitutional republic. And so the first person we're going to hear from today is Sarah Makin Acciani. Did I get that right?
No, but that's okay.
No, I'm so sorry. And I even asked before, Acciani. Sarah Makin Acciani.
I didn't get it right.
That's right. That's right.
Totally fine.
Well, as you all know, personnel is policy. If you've ever worked in elected office, if you've ever spent any time around organizations, you know that the people you have working with you and for you is almost as important in what you're trying to achieve. And Sarah is the Deputy Assistant to President Trump and Director of Strategic Outreach for the Vice President at the White House. She's doing incredible things in the thick of everything going on. She is molding, shaping, and crafting the public policy that we're all championing and supporting this weekend. I'm so excited she's here, so please help me welcome Sarah.
Can I do it from here? Is that okay? Well, thank you. If it's okay with you guys, I don't like being up at that podium. I don't love public speaking, and I'm more comfortable here, so I'm less likely to screw up if I talk to you when I'm seated. I'm really grateful to be included on this panel among actual rising stars and actual young people. I am not young. I'm especially honored when I look in this audience and see people who I have looked up to in DC. I believe Bridget Wagner is probably here. I know Dr. Charmaine Yost is here, Penny Nance. These are actual stars who have accomplished incredible things who I have looked up to for many years. I also work for a couple of stars, and as the Vice President often says, we're just really holding on for our lives following that speedboat in front of us. I don't take credit for that joke. The Vice President says that joke, so give him all of the credit for that one. And speaking of the Vice President, I had this whole plan laid out about talking about the administration's accomplishments and kind of giving you a running list so you could take them home and talk about them, parrot it yourself, but I don't want to steal his thunder. So instead, I'm going to share with you a little bit about my role in the VP's office and how I also serve in the President's office and what I do in the White House in general. I know you just heard from Paul Teller. I've been blessed to work with him and be his friend for over 10 years. I owe a lot to Paul. He's taught me so very much, and he's a tremendous guy. I think that Paul and I have made a pretty good team at the White House since day one. There's not a lot of us day oneers around, but we wear that as a badge of pride. And, you know, Paul and I, we're really lucky. We've got some other strong, passionate conservatives in the White House, Kellyanne, Russ Vogt, Derek Connett, OMB, and others. But Paul and I really serve, for lack of a better term, as sort of your point of entry. We try and do the caring and feeding of conservative groups and other individuals. And no offense to others in the White House who have a similar role, but I think Paul and I have a long history with a lot of you in this room. We've put in certainly Paul, he's put in a lot of the time. You know us, we know you. There's a trust and an understanding there, and I don't think that can be understated, because not only do we understand what matters to you, but we're there to listen, and we've always been there to listen. So naturally, we're the ones at the White House, I think, that folks come to when they want to decode conservatives. They trust us to tell you, or to tell them what you guys are thinking, what strategies you want them to consider, and when they're going to face pushback. They also look to us when they need backup on something, because conservatives have always shown up for this president. And this room is full of people that have always shown up for this administration, and we are really grateful for that. So thank you so much for doing that, and I know you'll continue to do it, and we can't do it without you, so thank you. But I want you to know that Paul and I, from day one, have always fought for you as well. So I'll give you just one example. When we started to hear rumblings in the White House about some offices starting to talk about an immigration proposal, Paul and I, we did the best we could to figure out exactly who was doing that, what offices were doing it, and we made our way in, and we finagled a way to figure out who the key players were, so that we could make sure that your names were on the lists of outside groups and people to be called in, so that they were getting your thoughts and opinions on the immigration proposal. Now, that's not to say that they listen to me and Paul all the time, but we are working for you all the time, because if you're not at the table, then you can't play. So Paul and I are your people inside, and we're working every day for you, and we'll continue to do that. And luckily, this administration is committed to advancing conservative policies, and like Matt said, personnel is policy. So while Paul and I are the ones connecting you with the White House and bringing you in, we're also ensuring that this administration continues to hire strong, smart, committed conservatives. And as many of you know, there's an office inside the White House called the Presidential Personnel Office. They handle the hiring for all of the political appointee positions throughout the government. God bless you. We do our best to keep them stacked with the best recommendations, so that the president has people in political positions that have his back. And I'll speak for just myself on this one, but when we identify people in those positions who do not have the president's back, I have gone to PPO and told them right to their face that that's the case. And that doesn't always make me popular, but I don't really care. I'm not here to be popular. I'm not here to make friends. So my husband's my friend. I don't need other friends. So, and your dog. And my dog, yes, she's also my friend, and she doesn't care when I tattle on people. We just don't have time for that nonsense. So you're either be on the team or go find another team to be on. In a perfect world, there'd be a conservative in every office monitoring and auditing those around them to ensure we've got good governance, and personnel is policy. And the last thing I just want to mention is another kind of side of my job. Aside from the outreach work that I do, I've been tasked with working on religious liberty and freedom issues in the White House. As many of you know, there is, this president has really put and shone a light on the need for not just domestic religious liberty, but international religious liberty. And I've been honored to travel to Iraq and Nigeria. If I could find more hours in the day, the list of places I want to go grows every day. By now, I hope you've all had a chance to see what the speech he gave the United Nations just a couple weeks ago, protecting. It was an absolutely historic speech. Over 120 UN heads of state or delegations were represented, and Secretary Gutierrez showed up and gave quite an impressive speech. It was not what we were expecting. It was actually much more supportive than we had anticipated. And I know there was a panel here yesterday on China. I'm sorry I missed it, but there's obviously no better time than now for this issue to be raised, especially at a place like the UN. More than 80% of the world's population lives in countries where religious freedom is either banned or threatened. We see people being persecuted for their religious beliefs at an alarming rate. I don't have to tell you, in China, Uyghur Muslims are imprisoned simply because of their faith. The persecution of Christians is on the rise. In Iran, persecution of Christians, Sunnis, Baha'i, and Jews continues. In Burma, the military continues to target the Rohingya Muslims and Christians with discrimination and violence. And houses of worship, which are sacred places and should never be a place of violence, They've seen unspeakable tragedy this year. In Sri Lanka, 300 Christians were murdered during Easter services. In New Zealand, 51 men, women, and children who were brutally killed while they were attending mosque. Pittsburgh and Poway, faithful Jewish communities. If we don't stand up for these people, nobody will. Around the world, religious prisoners of conscience continue to be imprisoned, detained, and disappear. And I'm so grateful for Gary Bauer and Tony Perkins, who are wonderful men and members of CNP and members of our USERF Commission who represent these prisoners and people around the world. The trend of religious intolerance is rising around the world, and this president put the full weight of the US government and called this out on the world stage. And I'm just so proud to work for a president who would take that up and do that as he did. So that's what I do in the White House. I ask that you guys continue to support us however you can do that with your networks. I don't know all of what that might be, but please tell me how you can help us. That's the best way to connect, and I'm here for you anytime. Joy, I see you nodding your head. I love you so much. Thank you. You're such a good support. But thank you for what you guys do and how you support us. Just keep doing it, and let me know how we can help you. We're here to listen anytime. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you, Sarah Makin Acciani.
There you go.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. All right. Hey, since 2017, the Washington Post on its masthead has said democracy dies in the darkness, right? Which is kind of ignorant because we're not a democracy. So they're kind of, we're a constitutional republic. A constitutional republic can die in the darkness, but if you're like me, a lot of the times it's those outlets and those media outlets that are covering up, concealing, twisting, distorting, and doing those things. Well, thank goodness for guys like James Okeefe and others who are actually bringing transparency and light to what happens in this country. As the founder and president of Project Veritas and Project Veritas Action, you've seen James's work over the years, and it's incredible, the people he has brought down and the things that he has brought to light. We're incredibly excited to have him here. Please help me welcome James Okeefe.
Thank you very much, Matt. Great to be here. I've got a video presentation, as usual. I show in addition to telling. So I'm going to tell my life story in 8 minutes and tell you about what's coming up next. So here we go. Project Veritas. Let's see if this shows up on the screen here. Project Veritas, Latin word for truth, right? Well, the vision has changed. 10 years ago, I'm in New Orleans, which is a special place, by the way, for me. I'll get to that in a minute. 10 years ago, I get a message from a girl named Hannah Giles on Facebook. Never met this person before. She says, have you ever thought about going into Acorn housing? I didn't know what Acorn was. We kept talking to each other. She said, what if you were to go into Acorn and say you were a prostitute? You have to understand how surreal the circumstances were. I'd never talked to this person before. I responded by saying there's probably a pimp in this situation. And she said, yes, I will do it. I drove down to see her, never met her before, and we were dressed like that. And we went around to all these offices with a hidden camera embedded in a satin tie and said, sort of Borat meets Morley Safer, we said, can we have 13 underage prostitutes? We want to traffic them in shipping containers. And to our shock, the government workers for Acorn said, you can declare them as dependents on your 1099s. You can bury the pimp money in the ground. We won't tell the police. We had these tapes. We were outsiders. We didn't know what to do with it. We released them one at a time, met a man named Andrew Breitbart, and it was an extraordinary series of events. It was an extraordinary series of events because you have to remember there was a political sphere of consensus unheard of in Washington. The Senate voted 83-7 to defund Acorn. The House of Representatives, democratically controlled, voted to defund Acorn. And President Obama signed the legislation 10 years ago, like last week. This was President Obama then.
What I know is that what I saw on that video was certainly inappropriate.
Certainly inappropriate. I got my lesson in media because the media was attacking me, saying that I was motivated by an animus towards African Americans. Outrageous. They had to print a retraction. They have printed hundreds of retractions about my colleagues in the last in the last 10 years, I've barely made a mistake or two. And they have printed that many retractions. Jon Stewart said this about the media reacting to that story.
You know who broke this story? These two. You're telling me that two kids from the cast of High School Musical 3 can break this story with a video camera and their grandmother's chinchilla coat, and you got nothing?
It actually was my grandmother's chinchilla coat. You can't make this stuff up. Truth is stranger than fiction. So I swear to you, I had no money, no organization, no donors, I had nothing. I had nothing. Now we have, 12,000 donors, 50 employees, $10 million budget. Then nothing. So fast forward, I'm in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is a special place in my heart for reasons I will now tell you. I was in New Orleans a few months later, walking into Mary Landra's office with a camera, cell phone camera. Hey, what's going on? Why you ignore your constituents? I get arrested. And the guy in New Orleans here, the corrupt prosecutor guy, arrests me and says, "Aren't you them boys who did that Acorn story?" I said, "Yes, that's me, exactly. I'm the guy that does the YouTube videos." He goes, "Yeah, we're going to have to keep you overnight." And they charged me with this ridiculous misdemeanor for entering using false pretenses, but they initially charged me with a felony. And in the affidavit, they said that I was trying to manipulate phones. In fact, the federal judge got involved, which was very rare because in misdemeanor cases, usually federal judges don't get involved. It was so unusual. And I went through this insane thing. The federal judge even said that federal buildings are the target of acts of violence. What was I going to do? Kill someone with my phone? I mean, this is outrageous. But I learned really what happens when you afflict those in power. In the affidavit, it said a third man is alleged to have waited outside in the car with a listening device. Sounds nefarious, like I was trying to wiretap somebody. Well, you know what the listening device was in the car outside? It was a cell phone. I mean, this is just crazy stuff. And all these people resigned a couple years later for anonymously blogging about me and my defendants. They were going on the internet and they were blogging anonymously in comment sections in the newspaper. They all resigned.
Today's revelation in the now unsealed court documents acknowledges Letton's former second-in-command was posting online anonymously and doing it leading up to fellow prosecutor Sal Pericone's resignation.
I submitted bar complaints again. This isn't here, down the street at the Hale Boggs Federal Building. All these prosecutors resigned for what they had done.
As the prosecutors who worked his case made improper comments online about him during his trial, and one of them may be influencing some very important national cases.
This is the guy, Jim Letton, longest serving United States attorney here in Louisiana, resigning in disgrace 6 years ago.
My resignation as United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Louisiana will take place.
He actually got a job teaching law at Tulane Law School. I don't know how. I walked up to him on a sidewalk and said, "Why did you do this?" A man clearly with a guilty conscience.
You're a nasty little cowardly spud. All of you. You're hobbits.
Hobbits?
You are less than I can ever tell you. You are scum.
I thought hobbits were the good guys. You can't make this stuff up. Truth is stranger than fiction. Fast forward 8 years, we do 200 investigations, 200 videos. Now the vision is now changed. What is the future? Here's the future. I get a message, but not from a girl on Facebook, a girl within Facebook who says she finds the things the company doing appalling. She feels the public has a right to know. This is a subcontractor for Facebook. She takes one of these little hidden cameras.
I saw things going on that I personally found to be troubling. I knew that something had to be done about it, and so I felt that the best thing to do was to inform the public.
But inform the public she did. She took screenshots of the code. This is the algorithms that Facebook uses to deboost video streams. She took pictures of them taking these live stream distribution videos and deranking them, deboosting them, and this heroic patriot lost her job at Facebook for doing this. By the way, they call it a stunt. I've done some stunts in my day. Working with whistleblowers is actually like investigative journalism. Everyone talks about whistleblowers. So another man was inspired by what she did. This guy's name is Eric Cochran, and he sent us images of them censoring Bible verses on Pinterest. You couldn't type in the word Bible verse, it would change it to verse us. and there's the code showing them assigning a severity level to that. He also blew the whistle on live action being classified as pornography. This man caused a total firestorm. First, Pinterest took the Bible verses off the blacklist. Then they doubled down and banned live action outright. Lila Rose is a member of your organization. And this man, and they took the YouTube video down. First time in my life they've taken a video down. I've done 200 videos. This is the first one YouTube has taken down this year. This guy was so heroic, he said, you know what, the time is now, James, I want to go public, and go public he did.
Well, to me, there's no other option. Like, I could go through life, and I could live in the comforts of life, and I could go on for 80 years, and then make money, do the formula of life, and then I'll just fall to ashes.
He inspired, I need another minute and a half. He inspired a guy inside Google to go public because he was inspired by what the guy inside Pinterest did. This guy works for Google. He's probably violating his own confidentiality agreement, and he's going on television to talk about Google's impact on the election because he's inspired by all the people who just came public.
It's a time to decide, do we run the technology? Does the technology run us? Are we going to continue to have elections that mean anything? Are we going to continue to think for ourselves?
He inspires another guy to go public within Google who gives us this memorandum, which is unbelievable, something out of a George Orwell novel. They're talking about editing out facts from Google search if those facts are unfair. They call it algorithmic unfairness. Listen to this.
In this Project Veritas video, which I did watch last night, imagine that a Google image query for CEOs shows predominantly men. Even if it were a factually accurate representation of the world, it would be algorithmic unfairness. In some cases, it may be appropriate to take no action if the system accurately affects current reality, while in other cases, it may be desirable to consider how we might help society reach a more and equitable state via product intervention. What does that mean?
This prompted more people to go public, recording Google insiders talking about how they're trying to prevent the next Trump situation.
Warren is saying that we should break up Google. And I love her, but she's very misguided. That will not make it better. It'll make it worse because now all these smaller companies who don't have the same resources that we do will be charged with preventing the next Trump situation. It's like a small company cannot.
And I'm sorry, guys, but you can spend all the money you want on local ad buys, but if Google changes their algorithms, they actually will prevent the next Trump situation, which this prompted all types of congressional hearings, reactions, and actions. It actually prompted another insider to go public and share us emails. They're calling Ben Shapiro and Prager and Jordan Peterson Nazis, which led to more congressional hearings.
Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and Dennis Prager are Nazis. Given that that's a premise, what do we do about it? 2 of 3 of these people are Jewish, very religious Jews, and yet you think they're Nazis. It begs the question, what kind of education do people at Google have?
All of this, you have to remember, none of this would be happening unless these brave people working full-time for the companies go public. They keep going public.
I had every incentive in the world to stay at the company and just click the paycheck. But I could never live with myself knowing that if Google was able to implement the plans that they were planning, I feel that when I'm coming and explaining what Google was doing, this is an act of atonement, okay, to make my conscience clear.
Now, he gets attacked by Google. I pay his legal bills. We have now had 4 insiders go public. What can you do to help? What's the vision in the future? The vision is as follows. We are an organization that, we talk about whistleblowers. These are real people on the inside of powerful institutions that want to blow the whistle. And Project Veritas is an instrument that helps them be catalysts for change. We have fought 12 lawsuits. I have won 7 straight lawsuits. And I make them bleed if they sue. And in about 10 days, you're going to see another whistleblower coming public, but not inside the government and not inside Silicon Valley. This person works for a 3-letter news agency, and he's recorded his CEO and all of his executives talking about their agenda when it comes to Trump's impeachment. Thank you.
God bless you, James. That was so unfair. I now have to go.
So James will actually be a part of a breakout session that starts about 1:30 or 2, and it'll go till 3. After 3 o'clock, he'll have copies of his book, American Pravda, available for people to pick up. Is that correct? Okay. And so if you want to read more about him, another individual who's a chance you'll have to pick up at the same time, same place, is our next speaker, Rachel Bovard. She recently co-authored a book with Jim DeMint called Conservative, Knowing What to Keep. And I'm thinking that plays off of Benjamin Franklin when he came out of the Constitutional Convention. When they asked him, what did you give us? He said, a republic if you can keep it. Is that right? That's right. And my guess is Rachel and Senator DeMint have done such an incredible job of distilling conservative principles and values down to easily know, easily understand, and easy to apply. That it reminds me of that Reagan quote, you know, there are no easy answers, but there are simple answers. You just have to have the moral courage to know what to do is right. Rachel's on the front lines fighting for that right every day. She serves as a senior policy advisor at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Honored to have you here today. Come on up, Rachel.
Well, good morning. They told me the vice president might interrupt us today, and I was like, okay. But they didn't tell me I would have to follow James Okeefe. Yeah, so I don't know which is more unfair. But good morning. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you this morning. I'm going to walk you through 3 things that I'm currently working on. And there are 3 projects. I'm going to start with the Conservative Partnership Institute, which is my day job. I'm going to talk about the book I just wrote with Senator Jim DeMint. And then I'm going to talk about my newest project, which is called the Internet Accountability Project. It's going to piggyback on some of the things that James just mentioned. So to give you an idea of what we do here at CPI, so CPI is an organization that I started with Jim DeMint, Ed Corrigan, and Wesley Denton about 2.5 years ago. And our mission is to serve and support the conservative movement on Capitol Hill. We like to say we have one client, and it's the conservative movement. And we do this in a couple of ways, 3 big ways. We train, equip, and unify the movement. And the first thing we do is we train conservative staff. Now, this is primarily what I do at CPI. There's a ton of you out there that give us the best policy ideas, but there's no one in Washington we found that really trains the staff how to take those ideas and give them the best tactics and strategies to move them forward. Because you can have the best policy ideas in the world, but if you actually don't know how to manipulate the Senate rules or the House rules, you're going to lose. And so that's a big part of what I do. I teach House procedure, Senate procedure. I teach people how to write budget amendments, how to read the federal budget. It's really boring, but it's really important. So things like that. And then we equip conservative leaders with the right staff. Personnel is policy. You heard Matt mention that. We do a lot of that work at CPI. We want to make sure that members on Capitol Hill, as well as the president, have good conservative staffing them. Because we spend a lot of money electing these guys, and then they get to Washington, what happens to them? They crawl into the swamp, and you never hear from them again. A lot of times that happens because their staff aren't conservative. Yeah, so we want to make sure that we train these staff, we vet them, and then we place them in these offices to make sure these guys have the best, solid conservative staff possible. And then finally, we unify the conservative movement behind a lot of strategic objectives and goals. We have a ton of views in the conservative movement. It's best, when we have a strategic mission going forward on how to actually sing from the same song sheet. We do a lot of that through the Conservative Action Project. I write all those memos that you see floating around. So that's something that we do at CPI as well. So this is an example of the training that we do. That picture you see is from my Senate procedure class. These are, I call little mini graduate seminars. They're 5 weeks long, 2 hours a week, and I teach you exactly how the Senate works, how the House works. Because again, you can have the best policy ideas in the world, but if you're going to get out-manipulated on the Senate floor by, Senate Democrats or the swamp, you're not going to get your ideas across the finish line. So these are the inside tools and tactics to make conservatives successful. We've trained 146 staff so far. We have 12 courses and seminars that we offer. These are open to conservative staff and also conservative groups. So we really are serving the movement on Capitol Hill, both staff and outside groups as well. And then we equip. We've filled a number of jobs on Capitol Hill and in the White House. That's a nice quote from our friend Paul Teller over there, who we work with a lot, as well as Sarah over here, getting good conservatives that we've trained into the White House. Because, again, the president can't implement his agenda if he doesn't have the right people on the inside. So we want to make sure those people are there. And then this is a project that we're working on I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the action session. So we have a number of members coming to Washington in this next cycle. We want to work with them now because when they get there, when they get elected, the next day, they're getting overwhelmed by the swamp. It is like drinking from a fire hose. The establishment is flooding them with, hire my guys, go to this fundraiser, do this. And so we want to be a conservative bulwark against that. We want to have staffing recommendations ready for these new members when they get here. If you want to hear more about that, I'm talking about it later this afternoon. And then finally, this is a lot of the work that we do. If you come visit us in Washington, you'll see that we have I'll come back to that. We have a big building in Washington that we host a lot of conservative strategy meetings in. A lot of White House staff, congressional staff meet weekly in our building to get the best strategies, best messages for the conservative movement moving forward. Because the movement is all over Washington. A lot of times they're in their individual silos. We want to make sure each part of them are talking. And then finally, you saw on this slide, I do a ton of media with Senator DeMint. We really are trying to take the conservative message to places where it wouldn't ordinarily be heard. If you follow me on any social media, you probably saw me lighting myself on fire on MSNBC recently. I probably won't be invited back. But you know what? They needed to know that their breathless coverage of Sharpiegate was stupid. So I told them. So that's the kind of work that I do in the media. And then I mentioned Senator DeMint and I just wrote a book called Conservative, Knowing What to Keep. Now, everybody's trying to define conservatism, right? The left is trying to tell us we're all a bunch of racists and bigots, and then people on the right are scratching their heads and saying, wait, why are we doing this again? And so this was our attempt to go back to the founders of the conservative movement, primarily Russell Kirk and Edmund Burke, and update that message and re-articulate it for this modern moment. Because conservatism really is a set of principles. It's not a reflexive policy ideology agenda. That's what the left gives us. Conservatism at its root is a philosophy of gratefulness. And so we get into that and why it matters and what it means. Senator DeMint obviously could have written this book himself, but he said, hey, nobody wants to hear from the old guy. So he said he needed a millennial, and that's where I came in. And my last thing I want to talk about is my project that I'm working on. I just rolled this out a couple of weeks ago with Mike Davis, who many of you may remember was the lead nominations counsel for Senator Grassley. He was in charge of the Kavanaugh hearings. So Mike is a fighter, and he and I together have rolled out the Internet Accountability Project. And this is really to take a federal policy look at what big tech is doing to us as a society. Not only from a privacy standpoint, right? These companies track you across the internet regardless of whether or not you use their services if they have an account, but also to really look at the human misery we allow to flourish online because we don't hold these companies accountable. The 18.4 million instances of sexual abuse reported on the internet and on these big tech companies that they're not doing anything about. We can do better. And I think it's okay for our federal lawmakers to start saying, how do we do better? And so we're here at IAP to facilitate that conversation. So thank you so much for hearing from me. It's an honor, and I hope to see many of you this afternoon.
That's outstanding. Thanks, Rachel. CPI is doing an amazing, amazing work here. And if you've never read Edmund Burke, I would encourage you, if you're looking for somebody to read about him, get to know his life and what he stood for. He really is kind of the founding father of modern conservative thought. So next, I'm excited because we've heard from a lot of great young rising stars. We could have had my colleague Briscoe Kane, who's up in the front there. I always want to make sure I mention him. He serves with me in Texas House, incredible warrior for conservative principles. But our last is our youngest. But you're going to be inspired by her. If you remember, Ronald Reagan said, socialism only works in two places: heaven, where they don't need it, and hell, where they already have it, right? And so what we're seeing is a rise over and over about where socialism is becoming more and more popular with the younger generation. But luckily, we have individuals like Morgan Zegers, who has risen up. She started a foundation called Young Americans Against Socialism to teach her generation, to teach her peers why socialism is so bad and so wrong. At only 21, she came very close to taking a seat in the New York State Assembly. She's doing an incredible job getting conservative and liberty-minded principles out to her peers, and we're incredibly excited to have you today. Come on up, Morgan. Please help me welcome her.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. All right, I'm a little short, so I've got to adjust this.
So I want to start out by telling a little story. I'm from upstate New York. It's very conservative, very Republican. My dad's a colonel in the Army, and it's very rural. So when I went to American University in Washington, D.C. for college, it was a little shakeup. It's the #1 most politically active school in the country, and it's also 90% identifying liberal. So it's definitely not like upstate New York. And I had some leftist bias in the classroom, and of course they burned the flag when Trump won and whenever they got mad. But the weirdest and craziest experience that I had at American was when I moved off campus into a house my last year. And I didn't know some of the girls that were going to be in the house, so I went around and I introduced myself. And I'm talking to this girl, and she's so nice, and we're getting along, and I'm getting a little distracted by something I'm seeing on her wall. And I'm looking at this poster, and there's some guys, and they look pretty familiar. It was Joseph Stalin, Lenin, Mao Zedong, Karl Marx, and Fidel Castro. And I have never seen people like that outside of a history textbook or outside of a black and white documentary. And here they were on the wall of my roommate. And so I asked her, I was like, "What's that?" And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, I'm a communist." Yeah, a communist. So I got to learn from her that year. I got to talk with her. We cooked meals together. I even let her take me to get my nails done. I've never done that before. But I really wanted to talk and bond with her. And what I learned is that, first of all, she thought conservatives were mean. She thought that because we don't put taxpayer dollars and government force and action behind something, we don't care about that. We don't care about those people. If we cared, we would do that. And so then the second thing was that she was so nice. She was a communist with mass murderers and dictators on a poster in her bedroom, and she was one of the nicest friends I've ever had. She cared about me and her friends and her family, and like a lot of people on this panel, and I'm sure in this room, she had a social media account. That meant she was really in touch with what was going on today and what was going on in the news. So she saw people were struggling in America, because, not everybody has an amazing life, and we need to help those people. But the only difference between me and her is that she actually thought that communism, socialism, ideas rooted in Marxism were the best way to help people. And here's the kicker. She is not alone. About 58% of people in my generation want socialism for the future of the country. So I said, what do I do about that? And I decided to start Young Americans Against Socialism. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and I can't tell you how exciting it has been to do this, because what do you think about when you think of certain issues that the left talks about? When I hear the border crisis, I think of a child being ripped from her mother's arms and a little girl with a sippy cup on the floor of an ICE detention center down on our border who's crying for her parents. That's the image that the left has created about the border crisis. When you think about climate change, oh my gosh, we're dying in a few years, in case you guys didn't know that. We're dying, and parents and politicians are telling young people across this country, you don't have a chance. Don't even have kids. It's not worth it. That is so scary. And I'll tell you what, The Road to Serfdom, I'm sure a lot of people have read that book here in this room. I love The Road to Serfdom because it talks about the rhetoric and the language that socialists have to use to come to power. They will change the definitions of words that we've always used: freedom, morality, opportunity, fairness. So that's why when I get so concerned, because I see on social media Bernie Sanders will post a video of a bunch of young people asking, am I really free if I have student loan debt? Am I really free if I have high healthcare costs? Am I really free if I only work my job to get healthcare insurance? Yes, you are very free. You are still free. But what's scary is that thousands and thousands of young people think that he's right and think that freedom is freedom from that responsibility, not freedom from an oppressive government. About 1 in 4 Americans think that socialism means achieving social equality, a way to achieve social equality. They don't think about it as that social equality comes through government force, government taking over the economy, taking over your life. They don't think about what happens. So I'm trying to tackle 2 things with Young Americans Against Socialism. First of all, we let down our kids in the classroom because they don't know what socialism is. If they did, I bet you they wouldn't be supporting it. There wouldn't be young people wearing Che Guevara t-shirts to LGBTQ pride parades. He threw them in prison work camps. He killed gay people. He didn't like gay people. He, again, put people into camps and killed them. And now, if you look at the clothes the camps marches and rallies that are on campuses these days, they carry Che Guevara shirts. And I'm about to be interrupted by an important person, so I'm going to let it happen. All right, so I'm just going to finish up. I am more than happy to get interrupted by the Vice President any day. He could do it all the time. My parents are going to be so excited to hear about what happened today. But I just wanted to finish up. I talked about how the left is using emotion. Guess what? They don't have any facts to back up that emotion in those stories that they tell to us all the time. And the left is not going to win because we have facts, history, statistics, economics, all on our side. And then if we use emotion and storytelling like they do, then we're going to beat them. And what we do at Young Americans Against Socialism, we understand that 90% of people in my generation have a social media account, and they spend about 5 hours a day scrolling through that social media account. So we figured, let's put the facts where they are already getting their content. We travel the country and we film the stories of people who have lived through socialism, people who escaped through Cuba, Venezuela, the USSR, and it's been going really well. Sorry, I know I'm kind of powering through this, but I have a video that I want to show everybody, just some highlights of some of the stories that we've told so far with Young Americans Against Socialism. We launched on August 15th, and we've already had over 40 million impressions on the educational content that we've posted on social media. And again, we launched less than 2 months ago, so we're really excited that we've reached almost 40 million people. So if Glenn, the AV guy, could play the video now, that'd be awesome.
My name is Ray, and I escaped socialism in Cuba, windsurfing across the ocean for 10 hours. If socialism were that good, do you think all these people were escaping Cuba? Socialism ruins people's life. I can't believe there's Americans that want that for us here.
Sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
I had to make those lines Bernie Sanders talked about. And it wasn't because I was rich, but because politicians like him destroyed my country.
U.S. lawmakers are now threatening to confiscate guns from law-abiding citizens for the betterment of society. Funny, that's exactly what the socialist government in Nicaragua told my people before they executed thousands of them and seized everything that they owned.
The common phrase of, you don't know what you have until you lose it, was a bit different for me. I didn't know what I didn't have until I found it. The Second Amendment that gives me the right to protect myself from attackers, including my own government.
The far left claims to care about Latinos. There's a caveat. Only if you think like them. The truth is, they couldn't care less about the millions of Latinos suffering under socialism.
All right, so those were just some of the examples. Thank you. Thank you. So those were just some of the examples that we've told to my generation on social media so far, and since we launched less than 2 months ago, we are currently preparing a paid advertising plan that's going to push out these videos directly to the screens of just my generation, and that's the beauty of social media advertising. It's so effective and efficient in terms of costs, and we're really excited to see what we can achieve in the future. Like the Vice President said, he kind of teed it up perfectly for me. It's important that we tell the story of freedom to our generation, and that's exactly what YAS is doing. And I want to just wrap this up with one really important lesson moving forward. When socialists come to power, they have to find a way to create division between the classes. They have to find a way to make people mad at each other. So when Che Guevara and Fidel Castro were storming to Havana on their communist revolution, I love history, so I love these little stories. When they were storming on their communist revolution to Havana, they would stop at little peasant towns, and they would go to the landowners and steal their animals, and then they'd give them to the peasants, and they'd say, this is what it's going to be like if you give us more power. We're going to give you this kind of stuff, because those evil rich people, they have all that land and money and animals and resources. You deserve that, and we're going to give it to you using government force. You just have to give us power. So flash forward to the 21st century. We don't really barter with land animals anymore, but we do have 44 million people that are experiencing student loan debt, about $1.5 trillion total. You have Bernie Sanders telling them, just elect me, and I will tax those evil rich people, and I will use government force to take what they have and give it to you and cancel those student loans. All you have to do is give me power. If you go on Elizabeth Warren's website, you can literally type in, I owe $100,000. If I elect Elizabeth Warren, what am I going to get taken off of that? Boom, $50,000. Sounds pretty good. So I want us to understand this moving forward. Do not let the left change what freedom means to people in my generation. We need to make sure we're talking to the people that are my age. Talk to the young people in your life. Make sure that, are they being taught what communism and socialism in class, or are they just being told that Stalin and Lenin and Castro and Chavez are all just mean, evil dictators? It's really important that we have conversations with young people before they just completely turn after seeing these awful social media videos that are completely changing the way they think about freedom and American values. But thank you so much for having me today, and I really appreciate the extra time to finish my presentation. Thank you.
Wasn't that great? Great job, Morgan. I don't know about you, but that's inspiring and encouraging. And you're going to have another chance to talk with Morgan, to talk with James, to talk with Rachel and others at a breakout session moderated by Kelly Shackelford today. I'm not sure exactly of the time, but when we do our breakout sessions, it'll be another good chance to hear from some of Conservatives' rising stars. I hope you'll join us. Thanks again for the opportunity. God bless you guys.